Welcome back to the Timeline Rewatch, where we cover all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, TV shows, series, one-shots, shorts, all of it in chronological order. This week we have Thor, the original Thor. Last week we did the Incredible Hulk, so if you haven't watched that one, go back and go ahead and give that one a listen. But this week we are going to talk about Thor and the one-shot of something happened or something funny happened on the way to Thor's hammer. As always, I'm Justin with my co-host here, Jacob. Jacob, how are you doing this week?
Not too bad. Excited to discuss this movie. I do think it's interesting. We both have struggled with the title, just calling it Thor, because the rest of the movies are like A Dark World, Ragnarok, Love and Thunder, and it's like it's like Thor the something, like the original Thor.
Well, you got Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, Captain America, the first Avenger, the Incredible Hulk, you got the Avengers, Thor.
And this movie's just Thor.
Not the Thor.
Which is very funny because he's like obviously a god and like probably the biggest being amongst
like,
these
why
other
not
superheroes.
Like the Mighty Thor?
Thor. Well, because that comes later, but yeah.
Okay. So let's talk. So this was released May 6th, 2011. The timeline date is 2011.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually happening right around the same time, probably a little bit after. Well, actually, the beginning of this is the middle of Iron Man 2.
Correct.
Which we learn is also like the end of the Hulk as well. So these are all about the same time, pre-Avengers time frame. Also pre-Steve Rogers being unfrozen.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes,
that's where we are. So, we actually are going to talk about something funny happened on the way to Thor's hammer first, the one shot where it's got Coulson driving in New Mexico to go to Thor's hammer, where he runs out of gas and has to stop to get gas, and he is trying to buy some donuts, can't figure out if he wants powdered donuts or chocolate donuts. And that's where two people come in to rob the gas station, and Coulson's just in the background.
Yeah, and just stops a robbery and like
so
the badass he is.
Let's talk about how he stops that. So he's like, excuse me, hello, I have my gun here too. Do you need this one? And so he slides over the gun, right? Yeah, and then he throws the donuts at them and like ends up attacking them and takes them both out, and then. Which was really funny because he just ends by putting both sets of donuts on the counter. He's like, I'm just gonna get both.
Yep.
And then walks away and like.
And then tries to pay, and the lady's like, no, and he's like, no, seriously, take my money. Like, it's okay. Which is funny because Phil Coulson like idolizes the Avengers, and he gets his little moment.
He gets his Avengers moment. Yeah. Okay, so this leads us to Thor.
Just Thor.
Just Thor.
Yeah.
We're in New Mexico, where the movie first starts, right? It doesn't start. Because they're Jane Foster and Eric Selvig and their intern are doing science. They're doing science. It goes back to explain Thor, Asgard, everything like that. Where Odin is talking about their battles with the Jotunheim in Tonsberg, Norway, in the 900s AD. So a long time ago at this point. Which, if you remember from Captain America, is where the Tesseract was hidden. So after that battle, they hid the Tesseract in Norway, or maybe it's just a spot they always go to. But yeah, so they hide it in Midgard, in Tonsberg, which later becomes New Asgard.
Yep.
So Tonsberg, Norway is a fictional town. But yeah, something that comes back to the Thor series a lot.
Yeah, and it checks out. Like the Norse people coming from Vikings, stuff like that, have a very strong lineage.
Well, do you think they are Vikings because of Thor?
Yeah, I do. I think that culture, like, if this is the way Marvel set it up to where Odin and his people
are the reason
came
why.
to Tonsberg to fight the Jotunheim, that the culture of people that were already, 900 AD. Yeah, I guess there could be.
Well, you got to figure in the medieval times was like the 1400s.
Yeah, so
roughly that was the end of medieval times.
I was just thinking like the Vikings traveling, but yeah, there were people there, and I could see where they would adopt that culture from there and then run with it. So
My wife brought up a great point. Is Norway cold that much because of the casket?
Ooh,
Is that why it
that is
became
interesting.
cold because of the Odenheim and them freezing Midgard?
Yeah. Is that the? Oh no, that would be.
I mean, science just says that Norway is cold because it's very far north,
Right.
but
it makes you think about what even about the Ice Age? Like, what if Jotunheim was there, or the frost giants were there before and were
Yeah.
testing out the eternal winter with the Ice Age?
yeah,
Interesting stuff. That'll never get explained.
it'll never get explained. Unfortunately, no, it won't.
It's a cool theory.
So let's talk about Thor is becoming king.
Mm-hmm.
They're showing him become king. Before we get too far, actually, the casting of the two children were perfect. They played future selves very well, even though they were only in it for like a minute and a half. But those royalty checks for the life are going to be amazing.
Yep.
Yeah. So Odin's about to crown Thor King of Asgard, and I think it's funny because in the movie it makes sense on the way it's like, oh, frost giants, but if you're thinking about that ceremony, you're sitting at that ceremony and you're like, I, Odin, King of Asgard, proclaim you, Thor, frost giants. Like, what?
Yeah.
What?
It's often interesting to think about what from the perspective of the innocent bystander.
Yeah.
And I like how with some of the newer series, Marvel plays with that a little bit. Like I talked about, I think in our last episode about with the Hawkeye series and about how her family was like witnessed the New York attack and Spider-Man Homecoming, with the Vulture and stuff like that. But yeah, it is interesting up to this point. It's like, what if you're just an innocent bystander of like Thor's crowning ceremony and you hear frost giants and everyone's confused? Because I'm sure that was handled pretty hush hush.
Yeah,
like,
I would love to see a TV series that just focuses on like, I'm an everyday citizen dealing with
like
this crap.
Take each movie and do a little snapshot of like, here's an episode of Joe Smith that was walking around when
when the Chitauri came down on New York.
Yeah. Or like if you're like, I think a really cool one would be from the first Iron Man movie, if you're someone from the village he saved. Like that experience would be interesting.
Just like little one shots.
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't have to be
a one
long.
shot series.
Yeah.
Could be like what ifs, but shorter.
All right, hear us out, Marvel. We got ideas. Come find us.
Pay us lots of money.
Have your people call my people. So
hey, Marvel's calling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that Feige on the phone right now?
Oh my god. I don't even have his number. So the whole Frost Giants thing happens. I think it's interesting that Loki had no lines until he actually goes to talk to Thor after that whole exchange, but with what Odin is saying to Thor and Thor is saying to Odin, Loki has a lot of non-verbal communication that is very like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of cool. So Odin, not Odin. Thor, Loki, and the crew go to the Odenheim to attack the frost giants.
And even leading up to that, you see Loki. If you know like anything about Norse mythology, like Loki is the god of mischief, and you see that immediately when he twists Odin's words a little bit and like just fires up Thor to the point that he says, I want to go to Jotunheim and like stop the frost giants. And Loki knows that he's like, I just have to say a couple words that's going to push him over the edge. And Loki goes, which is what he wanted all along, is he wanted Thor to get in trouble. But yeah, it starts right off the bat with the mischief.
So they almost leave because leave Jotunheim without creating conflict, but then Laufey decides to say, run back home, little princess. And it is in such the lowest toned, deep voice.
Yeah.
It's like, run back home, little princess. And I'm like, oh, that line is so cool. And then just everyone's like, damn.
Yeah, one guy was like, there it is. He was like, that's it.
I think even Loki was like, damn.
Yeah.
Immediately, because he knew that Thor was about to attack him. So Odin comes, saves the day, brings them back home, strips Thor of his title, sends Thor off to Midgard, which ends up being New Mexico. Interesting, though, because Odin doesn't have like a natural born heir to the throne. He's not going to give the throne to Loki.
I mean, everybody thinks it's Loki. See, that's where, again, I don't know how many people know that Loki's adopted at this point. But like
Odin knows.
Odin knows, but I don't know.
And he just sends his only heir to the throne.
Yeah.
off.
But we were talking about like from the perspective of a constituent or someone just watching the ceremony. Everyone's like, "Oh, Thor got sent home. Wow, that sucks." But Loki's here,
Loki.
and then Odin's like, "That's not gonna happen." But like, so that's where I'm curious to see how many people actually know that Loki's adopted, or like what they would think about Odin sending Thor away. Like,
we need to create a cartoon series.
I know,
or something
low
budget.
I'm invested now. That's all I can think about.
Maybe we can get Matt Damon to play Loki.
Oh my god. Go get Liam Hemsworth to play Thor. Oh god. All right, now we're down a rabbit hole we're not coming back from. So the Frost Giants, they attack the Frost Giants.
We're past there because he's sent off.
Oh, then we missed my favorite part.
The Frost Giants, they have the battle.
Then we missed my favorite part where Loki gets touched by the Frost Giant and realizes that he doesn't burn like the dwarf guy did. So he is, in fact, a Frost Giant.
And the Frost Giant just kind of like looks at him like...
He's like, oh, wait.
What?
Yeah.
That was the weirdest thing. Like, they're in the middle of a fight. He grabs his arm and is just like...
Well, and they make very clear reference before that to show the dwarf guy getting grabbed.
Yes.
He's not a dwarf, but he looks like a dwarf. Dwarf guy getting grabbed and showing the burns on his arm. And you're like, okay, that's what happens when a Frost Giant touches you. And then immediately they cut to Loki, who gets touched and nothing happens. And you're like, something's up here.
Yeah. So we're in New Mexico.
Yes.
Thor gets hit by Jane Foster's van. They use a taser on him, which knocks him out. He's the god of thunder for one.
Yes.
And he gets electrocuted.
I think that's hilarious. And two, how does he just fought a horde of Frost Giants and is gone on all these other battles, but a taser's what takes him out?
Yep.
Like,
Do we actually like the Marvel movies, or do we just?
Well, we're critical. I love them. I'm just very critical of them. Like, I got to point out issues where I see them.
I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, I really like these movies, but man, we literally point out every flaw. But that's the point of the podcast.
That's the point. But yeah, it is interesting. It's like, is it because that when Odin took the hammer away, did that take some of like Thor's superhuman godlike powers away, and then that makes him more vulnerable? More mortal? I don't know.
You can't get drunk, but...
Still can't get drunk and still eats a shit ton of food. So...
I mean, if those are the two powers that I could have...
But a taser is going to take you out. And a standard hospital tranquilizer puts you on your back.
I'll take it.
I
will take the life of not being able to get drunk by being able to drink everything and... eat all the food you want.
This comes back
and look like Thor.
I just thought about this though, but then in Endgame, he eats a ton of food and he actually gains weight, which I didn't think he like. How does that work then?
And drinks a lot of beer, and actually gets drunk.
Yeah, but he doesn't. But he has the hammer the whole time.
Is it because he's depressed?
Sorry, that's a fast forward, but yeah, that is something that popped in my head. I don't know.
That doesn't make any sense.
And I will say, Thor now, from what Thor is in Endgame, Ragnarok, and actually Ragnarok's a bad example. Endgame and Love and Thunder, totally different.
Yes.
Like after he has that thing in Endgame where he gets really fat and depressed, and then he reinvents himself, totally different than the Thor he is now. Yeah. He almost has like two, not necessarily midlife crises, but like he's got this moment where he's like, what am I without a hammer? And then he's got the piece in Endgame where it's like, what do I do now that like I killed this guy kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's a discussion to talk about later.
So the hospital that they take him to get him checked out, the MCU is great at a lot of things, but apparently naming a county hospital is not something they're good at because the hospital's name is County Hospital.
Mm-hmm. It's the county hospital. If you aren't out in the middle of the New Mexican desert, like, I don't know.
Like, you couldn't just name it something, like, and there was a thing, oh no. The town that they're in means, like, the bridge or something like that, or, like, bridge to nowhere or something like that. Oh, man, what was it? My wife looked it up.
I don't remember what town they were in.
Yeah, so, yeah, I thought it was funny that it was County Hospital, to which he then gets tranquilized because he's trying to break out, and the tranquilizer works. He's like, I'm Thor, god of
And in
passes
that
out.
whole scene, he's like throwing guys left and right. So he still has his strength, and then a tranquilizer is what gets him. I'm like, really? That didn't make a whole lot of sense.
Makes absolutely no sense.
What you gonna do?
Nothing. Literally nothing. So, okay. Sorry. I'm trying to find an here we go. They are in Puente Antigua, which means Old Bridge.
Oh.
Could it have been like Bridge Hospital or something like that?
Right.
Puente Antigua Hospital.
See, and I'd like to think like that they intentionally named a town that way, but like
because it's also a fictional town as well,
right? And that has nothing to do with, unless you're talking about the bridge, as in like the Bifrost Bridge. But
exactly, is it the old bridge? Like, did they name it Old Bridge because the bridge is the Bifrost is the bridge to there,
and it's been around for a very, very long time.
I mean, Marvel's very intentional on things, so it's something to note.
Yeah,
it's certainly interesting. It'll never come back ever.
No,
again,
probably not. But
unless that's where the Battle of Secret Wars is. But
well, Asgard's gone at that point, so the Bifrost is probably kaput.
I'm saying Puente Antigua.
Oh, I gotcha.
Okay, so
we're talking.
Yeah, so we're at the hammer now. And this is where Stan Lee comes in because you're a lot better than the first episode.
Yes.
So this is Stan Lee's appearance. What is he doing?
I love this scene for multiple reasons. It's such the redneck thing to do in the middle of a desert where you have something random. It's like King Arthur's sword, where it's stuck in the stone, nobody can pull it out. So the rednecks show up, they bring their trucks, they bring their beer, they make it a big thing, and they try to pull it out. So Stan Lee is one of the guys in his truck that thinks they can tie it to the hammer and he can pull it out and ends up totaling his truck. It rips the bed off the back of the truck.
It's really funny.
Yeah.
Did it work?
But it's, again, so innocent bystander perspective now that I can't shake this. So what if you're one of the rednecks there and S.H.I.E.L.D. rolls up? Because the next thing is Coulson's up on the hill, hey, I found it. What do they tell people?
The government's here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clear out.
Well, didn't they hear about that in the diner? That's how they find out that it's
that's
50
how
miles away.
Jane and Thor and all of them found out about it. Yeah.
Because it's the rednecks in the diner talking about oh yeah, we were there.
Oh yeah, Jimmy down there said he found a.
Yeah, and then the government showed up and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Loki lies to Thor about why Odin is dying. And he basically blames it on Thor because he couldn't handle it and that he was about to die because he had to send Thor off.
Mm-hmm.
And, no, it's actually because Loki got him worked up and then he passed out because he got worked up.
Well, and at this point, it was a pretty low blow because this is after Thor realizes he can't have his hammer, that he's not worthy enough yet to get his hammer back after he fought all the way to get there, tried to take it, and then he's just defeated. And S.H.I.E.L.D's able to capture him, he submits willingly, and then Loki visits him there, and it's Thor was already at a low point, and then you just knock him down even farther.
Also, I was thinking about this in the middle of the the hospital scene.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine living in a world where you have your doctors have this yellow glow over you, like Odin has, and you have all this technology, all this fancy stuff, and then you get to Earth, and you have a hospital room, and you're just what am I laying in? This is really dingy. That brings me back to Captain Marvel, where the one Kree was just it's a shithole.
Yeah.
I think about that more and more every day. I just look around every day outside life, and I'm just this place is a shithole.
It is interesting to think about. Yeah, how some of these beings come here and they're oh, we're so far advanced and have been around for longer. But at the same time, it's the Asgardian people are advanced, but they still live pretty primitively. It didn't look like they're not the techno people you think they would be.
No.
They're still dressed in furs of animals and capes and stuff. They're still very locked into that medieval kind of theme. So
yeah. So Eric Selvig is Danish. He talks about how Thor and Loki and Mjolnir and Asgard and all that is stories of his childhood. Well, he's Danish, so he's from that area. Yeah. So the childhood stories make sense. Was also reading something that Eric Selvig is also a secret Hydra agent.
Yeah,
in the comics.
That didn't surprise me.
So
I kind of get an off vibe from him, which we know why later, that Loki's controlling him. But yeah, that didn't surprise me at all. He also makes reference to Bruce Banner when after S.H.I.E.L.D. come and raids their lab they got going on, takes all their stuff. He talks about knowing someone that's worked with S.H.I.E.L.D. and like what happened, and that somebody's Bruce Banner.
Yeah. All right. So this brings us to the battle at the very end, which I meant to look up the name of the bot that comes.
I think it's just the Destroyer.
Yeah.
I don't think it has a fancy name. This movie's terrible with names. It's Thor. It's the county hospital.
The Destroyer.
It's the old bridge town.
The old bridge town.
The Destroyer. The casket. Like nothing is like what it should be.
But then you look up Odenheim, and you'd probably never guess how Odenheim is spelled.
Oh yeah, it's
like Jotun.
Yeah, it looks more like Johann Schmidt than it does Jotunheim. Yeah.
You haven't called anybody Johann Schmidt.
I have not called anybody Johann Schmidt in a while. So.
Okay, so there was clearly S.H.I.E.L.D. agents on the buildings in there because they report that was it Xena, Jackie Chan, and Robin Hood show up to fight the Destroyer.
Yeah.
Which
it's a little
or no, they come to find Thor at this point.
Yeah.
Not to fight the Destroyer. They're coming to find Thor. And that's a little, I don't think it's really PC.
No, it's not really PC.
Certainly not PC at all. So that was...
Which weren't there 4 people?
There were, and they only called out 3 of them.
Because it's the dwarf guy that doesn't get called out then.
The dwarf guy that's taller than everyone else.
Dwarf, but
he does look like a dwarf.
He looks like a dwarf.
He does. So
like a medieval dwarf.
They're called little people.
Well, yeah. Okay,
probably
fine.
not even that.
But he's not
politically
a dwarf.
correct. So
he's not a dwarf. I'm just calling.
He's not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I thought that was. I was like, oh, that's a little touchy.
Says the one that keeps calling this guy a dwarf.
Call it as I see it. He looks like a dwarf. I don't know his name. Calling him a dwarf.
Okay, so Loki uses the casket, which is the power of the Fimbulwinter. Which is what they were fighting over in the 900s AD. To freeze Heimdall, he ends up sending the Destroyer to Earth, which is funny because somebody asks Coulson, is that one of Stark's? And Coulson's just like, I don't know. He doesn't tell me anything. And this is literally at the end of Iron Man 2.
Right.
Which is really funny to me.
It does look like Stark-esque. Like,
it would look like something that Stark would create.
Yeah. And it also, like, that's something that I would be interested to see the origin of. But, like...
The Destroyer?
Yeah. Because you see it at the beginning of the movie when it kills the Frost Giants, where it just like walks out, zaps them, and walks back. So is that something? Is that an
Asgardian technology?
Yeah, is it an Asgardian technology, or is it something that Odin has captured? Because like where he's located is in like the Hall of Antiques or Artifacts or whatever of presumably people he's conquered. So it's like I don't know.
Yeah, talking about King the Conqueror. Odin is a real conqueror.
Yeah, look up that guy's backstory.
Yeah.
He got some interesting past.
Yeah, not good either.
Not the man you think he is.
No. And, well, Hela in Ragnarok talks about it, so.
Yep.
That's for a future episode. Let's see. Loki.
Yeah, so we have the Destroyer coming to fight Thor on Earth.
Yeah, it comes to fight Thor on Earth. This is where Thor kind of like sacrifices himself to save everyone else. Then he becomes Thor, the mighty Thor again.
Not the mighty Thor. That's somebody else.
Who's the mighty Thor?
Jane Foster. Because remember, she doesn't want to be called Lady Thor. She wants to be called the mighty Thor. That's why they don't use it. That's my guess is why they don't brand it that way.
Do you think they really forecasted that far?
No, but I think it was super convenient. Like, because if they had done the mighty Thor for this movie, she would have had to have been Lady Thor, and then especially in today's day and age, it's a big apropos thing that she is Lady Thor and he has to be Thor. Like, like in high school sports where you have the Eagles for the men's teams and the Lady Eagles for the women's teams. So you don't want to give that mantra. So that's why she's the Mighty Thor. It worked out really well. I'm glad they did it that way.
Okay, that's fair.
But yeah, that's why if they would have went Mighty Thor with this movie, they would have been screwed when they came to Brock.
Well, they would have came up with something else.
She would have had to have been the Incredible Thor? That's already been taken. She would have had to have been Lady Thor, and that would have been not as good as it was. But or she could have been Jane Foster Thor.
Well, Thor becomes Thor.
Yes, Thor
gets
Thor
his hammer back. He gets all of his stuff. He defeats the Destroyer kind of actually really easily once he is able to get everything back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is another point of like the villain's really easy in these movies.
Like Thor was almost fighting with a handicap, obviously.
Yeah.
And that's how it was so easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Loki ends up he lets the Frost Giants in and then kills Laufey.
Yep.
Was that like the whole plan all along, or did he have a change of heart at the last minute?
He's always looking out for himself. I think what he thought was at this point, Thor's not coming back. I think that's what he thought. And if he can bring the Frost Giants into Odin's room,
yeah,
but without Odin knowing that he brought them in, and then he kills Laufey, then it looks like, oh, my son saved me, like my one son that's still around, that's never disobeyed me.
And then go and destroy. Because then he goes to try to destroy
right.
Odenheim.
And then he's like, I'm gonna finish what you started, Dad, and Loki wants the power, so it was a very God of Mischief move to be line everything up.
Yeah.
But technically, he killed his own father though, because Laufey was his father. So it's an interesting.
Well, is Laufey his father?
Mm-hmm. They said he was.
I know he was a Frost Giant. I didn't realize
Laufey
was his father.
Yeah. Because when Odin's talking about where he found Loki, he said he took Laufey's son. That's what he says. Yep.
Killed his own dad.
Killed his own dad right in front of his fake dad. Or his adopted father. Yeah, adopted father. It's a very messed up family.
Adopted kids are still real kids, Jacob.
I know, but adopted father, fake father. It doesn't matter.
Jacob's getting canceled on this podcast.
Loki doesn't care. But no, the more you think about this, if you look at it through this lens, it's a pretty messed up family. A dad banished his own son? His only true son?
After he's about to name him king?
After he's about to name him king, a day before. He messes up one time.
This movie is very not
and it sounds like Thor has done these little things before, because it was he talked about how he was reckless and didn't think and didn't make the decisions of a king, and then he was ready to crown him king.
This movie is definitely not meant for 2023.
I know.
It's a good thing it came out.
We've come a long
12
way.
years ago.
We've come a long way since then.
They would have been tearing this one up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Which is what I said. That's why it couldn't be called Mighty Thor, because Lady Thor would not have gone over well, I'll tell you.
So Thor gets back to Asgard to fight Loki to stop him from destroying the Odenheim with the Biofrost. He ends up putting Mjolnir on top of Loki after knocking him down to hold him down to go stop the Biofrost. I understand that you can't lift Mjolnir if you're not worthy.
Yeah.
It's a free object sitting on top of your chest. Why can't you just maneuver out?
I don't. That's a good question. I don't. Maybe because it's. Well, you can't use the argument it's so heavy, because then why didn't it crush him?
Yeah, because if it was heavy, it should have crushed him, or he shouldn't have been able to breathe, or something like that.
Right.
And then in Dark World, he puts it on a coat hanger. It's sitting on Tony Stark's table. It's doing all these other things that's clearly not crushing things.
Yeah.
But I don't understand how he couldn't maneuver it. But maybe just literally physically couldn't move it.
And if Loki can move through space and time, why didn't he just zap and move somewhere else?
Even better.
You know what I mean?
Plot hole.
Because he has the ability to move himself other places. He moved to Earth, he moved around Asgard, went to Jotunheim without the Bifrost.
Is he actually moving there, or is he astro projecting there?
Well, that's a fair point.
Because
he could have still astro projected.
I would say he's astro projecting to Earth and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, at that point, he could have astro projected and tried to stop Thor again. He did like make all those copies of himself, and then I don't know. That's a fair point. Maybe he was just beaten down enough that he's like, I don't want to try.
Yeah, I don't know.
He's very much the villain that just kind of gives up, though.
Yeah.
Like even in Avengers, he's like, I got beat.
So
this sucks.
Thor ends up destroying the Biofrost altogether, which comes back later. So he destroys the Biofrost. Loki and Thor about fall off the bridge. Odin comes to save them, grabs Thor, and then Loki just lets go and then goes off into wherever he's going. I was thinking that maybe this is where like he meets up with Thanos to start that whole thing, because the next movie here is the Avengers.
Right.
So he could be meeting up with Thanos to go get the Tesseract, but then I remembered in the post-credit scene, he actually Selvig meets Fury for the first time to start working for S.H.I.E.L.D. Fury shows Selvig the Tesseract, and Loki convinces Selvig to join S.H.I.E.L.D. Which could be astro projecting.
Which could be, yeah, but it makes you think, at what point did Loki come into contact with Selvig? Like, because in Avengers, he kind of like taps people and they become his minions. So it's like, at what point did...
Well, I think he just like went up to him. Cause I can't remember the words that he used, but he was just like, yeah, you want to do that. And then Selvig's just like, okay.
Yeah. But along that same vein, for him to be astro projecting himself, he would have to be alive somewhere.
Probably with Thanos.
Yeah.
At that point, getting the Chitauri.
Yep.
Ready for the next episode.
Yep.
So, next episode is the Avengers.
Yep.
So, finally there. Like, we're already there. Not even finally.
Yeah.
Like, we're already to the Avengers. The first phase is just about complete. So we're breaking these into what we're calling... We're not calling them phases. Marvel calls them phases. But we're changing the phases up a little bit. So, we're breaking everything from the beginning of the chronological universe to Avengers as phase 1. Then everything from Avengers to Age of Ultron is phase 2. And then Age of Ultron to Endgame is phase 3.
Yeah.
And then post Endgame is phase 4 until
we get something else.
King Dynasty.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think that makes sense. Talking about this whole phase as a whole, is what I've liked with some of these movies is they focused on what the character is without their said power. Like Tony Stark's, like I mentioned, in the last Iron Man, a lot of his movies are about himself without the suit. Like that's where the main focus lies. And this movie was all about Thor finding out who he is without his powers, and that's how he actually like appreciates what he has, becomes worthy, becomes, the righteous one to wield Mjolnir. But then Captain America kind of get that before he gets the serum. And then the Incredible Hulk doesn't really matter. But yeah, so I liked how they set all these up in preparation to Avengers. The only two you really don't get that with is Hawkeye and Black Widow, but they kind of get touched up on later. So
yeah,
and everybody comes out even in the end. But.
Yeah. All right. Well, until next week where we cover the Avengers, be sure to follow us on social media at Timeline Rewatch on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and you can catch all of our episode videos on YouTube. If you like this, be sure to like, subscribe, and tell a friend, especially if they like the Marvel Universe. And I think they should get something out of this. I hope you got something out of this. If you notice any plot holes or stories that we missed, things that really do matter that we did not cover, be sure to let us know. And if you notice anything coming up on a future episode, be sure to also let us know so we can note that on here. But until next week, guys, have a good one.